Hey, welcome to my channel. So that's how you do that. I'm Joe Latender, and in this video I'm going to show you how to install vinyl plank. Now this is a vinyl plank installation through an entire house, the main level of a house. It has a living room, a kitchen, a dining room. It also has a hallway, a back foyer, or a back entrance into the house. And we also have a bathroom and a couple of bedrooms. So there's a lot to this. And in this video, I'm going to share with you some of the key things that I know that will help you with your vinyl plank installation, such as figuring out plank direction. And then after we figure out plank direction, where do you start? Now, one of the things that you want to avoid when you're doing a vinyl plank installation is you want to try to avoid working backwards. I'm going to go over this deeply, or a lot more, in the video later on, but I want to kind of explain that to you. Vinyl plank has a locking system. It has a tongue and a groove. Now, the vinyl plank is intended for you to work away from that groove, okay? Whenever we work away from the tongue side of the plank, that's what I consider working backwards or in reverse, and that's something that you want to try to avoid, because some plank it's a little more difficult than others, and some plank it is easier, but it's always a little more challenging because there's a few extra steps with that. And so you want to try to avoid that. And especially if you are looking to not use transitions and have that seamless plank install. I'm also going to share how to do layout in here, how to figure out a layout so that you don't have small ugly pieces, to be able to transfer your plank or continue your plank from room to room where it makes it the easiest. So layout is actually really important. Then I'm going to go over some things with you, like working backwards, going around walls, and some tips and tricks that I have picked up over the years that are really going to help you with your plank installation. So let's get started with plank direction. All right, let's start out with something basic, a bedroom here, and let's see how the plank looks running north to south. Now I start on that outside wall because I can get a few rows installed before I run into anything like that closet or a doorway. So it makes things real easy. If I was working east to west in here, I would start and work away from the door because it's a lot easier to work away from a door into a closet. And so that's why I would start along that bottom wall there. So you can see doing a basic room, really pretty simple. Now let's move into something that has a few more areas, like a living room, a kitchen, a hallway, coming down into a back area here where the back entrance is. Now these areas that I'm circling would be what I would consider an area I would need to work backwards in if I started on that outside wall. So that's a little bit of working backwards. Now let's check and see what would happen if we started over by the fireplace running this north and south. Now, as you can see, I'm not going to really have much working backwards at all other than over by the fireplace. I do want you to be aware that if you do decide to go north or south or east or west on your vinyl plank job, there really is not a right or wrong answer. There is definitely, sometimes it can make it easier one way or the other, but it's really your choice on which way you want to go. For example, some people might think if you went the long way with the plank running parallel to the long walls, it might have a bowling alley effect. So it's really your choice. Because it's a floating floor, there's not a right or wrong answer. Now let's add a bedroom onto this and see what happens with this. So you can see it's really not much different. We're just going to flow right into the bedroom if we were running east and west starting in the living room. Same thing, we're going to work backwards in the kitchen and in that back entry area. Now let's see what it looks like by starting somewhere else. If we start up in this bedroom here and we run this plank east and west, we are going to flow through. We'll come back and work backwards into this closet later on. For sure, wait until you get out into this main area here, but you can see that it'll flow nice. Now in the kitchen, in that back foyer area, you're not going to be working backwards, and we will work backwards in this hallway. Now starting in this bedroom, just showing you this different way, it just shows you that you can stage your project to how you might like it. You can also check to see which way is going to be the easiest. And so drawing things out like this and then figuring out where the plank will land and how it will all flow can really simplify the process for you in making a choice on what your plank direction is going to be. So you can see if I started over there, I'd work backwards in a couple of spots. Now starting here in the bedroom, I'm not going to have any working backwards at all. This is working north and south, obviously, so you can see that maybe this would be the choice to take if you didn't want to work backwards, or maybe this would be the easiest way. But you might not be able to start in that bedroom first. It might need to be out in the living room. It really depends on your situation with your project. Again, we'll be working backwards into these two areas if we start out into the living room. You can see I added a second bedroom and a bathroom onto this and what this would look like. Now, no matter where you start, if you're going east and west in this particular situation, because we added on these other rooms, you're going to have to work backwards somewhere. With this big project, it cannot be controlled if you're going to run your plank east and west. But I do want to share with you some different options that you have here. So if we go north and south and start back into that bedroom, you can see this is all going to flow pretty nicely again, not much working backwards at all. But again, you might not like the look of running this north and south in this situation. So it's really a choice you need to make. The only place where you'd really need to work backwards in this entire area would be up in the bathroom area and a little bit in that closet, which is all normal, easy stuff. So the project that you have is probably going to look different than what I shared with you, but I wanted to share the basic principles to you on how to figure this out and then discuss working backwards, things like that. Staging, okay? Staging can be a big part of most people's project, because you might say, okay, I want to start the remodel in this bedroom, finish that room, move on to this one, because of furniture or whatever else. So before you even get started with your remod, you should think about these kinds of things so that you can start in an area that's going to make it easiest for you. I gotta be honest, I wouldn't cause myself a bunch of problems with making my plank installation more difficult, because I totally want to start in this bedroom and it has to be this bedroom. I would consider those things before I made a decision on exactly where I'm going to start. Draw it on paper. There's computer programs out there too that you can use, but do that. Make your marks just like I shared with you so you can see what you're going to run into and know exactly what to expect for your project. Now, the next step that I want to bring you through is the layout process. Now, I'm going to show you using these drawings and also live action on the job on kind of really to simplify this layout. What's really important with layout, especially if you're not using transitions, is you want the plank to land in as many doorways as possible. And what I mean is the long joint of the plank, to make it easy for you to get into another room. So let's go and check out the layout process. So what I like to do is I like to use what I call the 10 plank method. I put 10 plank together and I'm going to use those to measure off of to figure my layout. So I'm going to figure out the width of this room and get the center point of it. And once I do that, I'm going to make a mark on the floor right where that center part is. And then I'm going to measure to the wall to find out how large of a piece I'm going to have. Now imagine if I put a bunch of plank together from that mark to that wall, I'd be able to find out how large of a piece I would have along that wall. And if I connected plank away from that mark going the other direction, I'd be able to see that that would be the same amount. Now that I know how large of a piece I have on the wall, now I can go down to the bedroom door based off of that, and I can see exactly where the plank is going to land inside that doorway, which it will land in the doorway, and I like that. Now the next thing is to find out how large of a piece I'll have in the doorway across from the bedroom door. And so I just measure away from that, get my measurement, and then I'm going to go to my 10 plank and I'm going to measure off of that to figure out exactly how large of a piece I'm going to have. And it's a little over 4 inches. Now again, just imagine if I connected a bunch of plank from that mark and put it together until I get to that outside door, it would be about 4 3/4. Now I need to go and check into the bathroom. So I'm just going to measure away from where that mark would be into the door to see where the plank is going to land in that doorway. And so I just transferred a mark right off the corner there at the 3.5 inches, and then I'll measure from that mark to the doorway and kind of get a good idea of where that plank's going to land. So using my 10 plank to figure out where that is going to land, you can see when I stretch it across, it only gets to 58 5/8. Well, that isn't enough. So what I can do is I can put that 58 5/8 that I came up with on the edge of the plank there to start over another run of 10 plank. And you can see once I get to the desired amount, I can find out how large of a piece I'm going to have there. Now if I put a bunch of plank together from this line, you could see it would go past about an inch. And if that was the case, then what's going to happen here is the plank is going to have to wrap around both sides of this door. This makes it really difficult to get through doorways when the plank lands in a doorway like this. It's not really fun, and I don't recommend for you to get yourself in this position, which is why I like to do the layout the way that I'm doing. It just makes it so much easier to get through a door when the long joint lands in a doorway, especially when the trim is on. You can see how easily this will be for you to be able to go into another room. And let's not forget, one of the biggest reasons why we want to be able to go through doorways is to avoid those transitions. And so now what I need to do is just move that mark over about 1.5 inches. That's going to be about enough to be able to hit that door, but now I need to go check these other areas that we already figured out. If I adjust this plank back to make that door, what's it going to do to the rest of the layout that we've already figured out? Now, just to kind of give you a good example here, if you had a bunch of plank together and you moved it, you'd be able to see how large of a piece you're going to have along those walls now. Now, instead of doing that, I just measure, but I just want you to understand what I'm doing here. So you can see if we moved that main line, we'd have a 2-inch piece on the outside wall, 5-inch on that main wall, would still go into the doorway of the bedroom, and we'd have a 3.5 or 3.25 inch along the exterior door for the back door. So I could just move this line over 1.5 inches, and that will be the main line that I'm going to use for my layout. Now I do have a problem. If I snapped a line right there, then the fireplace would be in the way. I'd like it to extend from the cabinet to the exterior wall all the way, making it easy to measure to when I start my first rows. So I can move this again just by measuring from my 10 plank. And again, I would just want you to imagine, with me measuring from the 10 plank, if I just put 4 plank together from that mark, that's where I can make a mark on the floor. But instead of doing that, I'm just going to measure from the 10 plank. And again, just imagine, I really want to bring this home. You always want to move things a certain amount of plank, and as you can see, I'm going to move this line over 4 plank. Now once I make a mark on the floor there, now I can measure from that mark that I made to the exterior wall. I can go down to the other side by the cabinets, measure up away from the exterior wall the same amount, snap a line, and now I'm ready to start my very first rows. Now if you are by yourself and you need to snap a line, you can just pound a nail right in the mark that you made, hook your chalk line onto the end of it, pull it nice and tight, and then you can snap your line. And again, now we're ready to install our first few rows. We always want to face the tongue towards our starting wall. We always want to work away from the groove. So I'm going to be working away from the groove this way and this way. So that means I want to start this first plank towards that wall with the tongue facing that way, and then down here at the end with the tongue facing the wall down there. So I want to show you what the tongue and groove are. So this is the groove. And one way that you can tell if it's the groove or not is it usually has a slit in there or a groove that you can kind of see, like there. There's also this little lip that's on there that you can distinctly tell. But one other way that you can tell is if you flip the plank over, you can see the pad runs all the way to the edge on the groove side. And so here's an example of the tongue. It doesn't stick out quite as far, doesn't have a groove, doesn't have that notch I shared with you. It's just a little stub that sticks out from the plank. So that's going to be the tongue side. Now if you look at the back of the plank, you'll notice the pad does not run all the way to the edge on the tongue side. So there's another way that you can tell between the tongue and the groove. I'm going to do what I call bridging, where I'm going to have part of the plank overlapping on this side and part of it on this side of the plank. I get it in the track, and that's going to help me get these 2 planks straight. This is what I call bridging. I'm going to use my tapping block to get it to lock in now. And now I'm going to continue on, and this is going to help me keep this plank straight and also these 2 plank together. Now I'm going to bridge it again, but I'm going to lock in the long joint, but I'm not going to lock in the short joint. I'm going to just make it just shy of where it needs to go. So now all of this is locked in, and it's not going to come apart when I move it. Now I'm going to wait on this last piece because I have to mark and cut it, and I'm going to wait till I get this somewhat straight before I mark and cut that piece. Now what I need to do is I need to measure from the edge of the plank. I'm putting the tape measure up on top of the locking system, only measuring to the surface or to the finished part of the plank, measuring from the beginning of that plank to where I stamp my chalk line, and then we're going to get this secured and make it nice and straight. So now I'm measuring off of my 10 plank here to see how far I need to be away from that line, somewhere around 40 inches. So I'm putting the tape measure up on top of the locking system, and I'm going to measure just the finished part of the plank. I'm measuring down close to 40 inches, and I'm just going to round up to the next full plank, which is, in my example, would be 41 and a 16th. So that's how far my plank needs to be away from that chalk line. Now I'm going to sacrifice one plank here, and what I want is I want the groove side. So now I have 8 scrap pieces here that I'm going to use. I'm going to show you what we're going to do with these now. Now I'm going to measure and get my plank perfect with the line here, which is 41 and a 16th. I showed you that. Now if you were on concrete, you could just use glue and glue this scrap piece down. On concrete, you can use a glue. Now this is a special glue stick. I'll leave a link below in the description of this video. It's also a 1/2 inch in diameter, so you might need a different type of glue gun. It usually only takes about 2 seconds for that glue to react after you stick it down, and then you can use a pry bar later on to get those up. Now I like to put these at every joint, This is the way the plank is supposed to go in there. I just reverse it. So now I have the tongue facing me instead of the groove. And then I'll just stick it up against the wall or cabinet. And then for my expansion joint that I'm going to leave against the cabinet, I use the locking system as my guide. So I'll just make a mark right where the groove ends. That'll give me my 1/4 inch up against that wall. So I'll get this locked in, use my next plank here, and do the bridge method again. You can see that plank isn't going anywhere. It makes it so much easier this way. So once we're installing all the plank in that room, then I'll go back and I'll install that very first row that we left out. And this just makes it so much easier because you were able to build a nice solid foundation in the beginning. And coming back and installing this row is really simple. All you do is line up plank right on top of the plank that's already been installed. I make sure it's lined up perfectly with the plank underneath. And then I also make sure that I stagger the butt joint a little bit different than any of the other plank. And now you see me using my cheater board to mark the wall out onto the plank. So we just take that plank, go cut it, and now I'm going to remove all those little tiny pieces that we used to secure that floor. And then we're simply just going to put these pieces in. Now I do like to use a pull bar, and I want you to be aware here that there are some really chintzy pull bars out there. Make sure you get a good high quality pull bar. It's very important. Now at this point I'm done with the 10 planks, so I'm going to take these apart so we can use these now. Now I'm going to cut 3 starter pieces. This is a random pattern, so it doesn't have to be any specific measurement. I'm just going to make some marks. This is the side that I'll be starting with, so it'll be like this. So I don't know, maybe my first piece will be like that. Maybe I'll do a bigger one, and let's do one that's in between the 2 marks. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to try to do 3 rows at a time, especially in big open areas. So I'm going to take this piece out and slide it forward that I used when I was bridging. We don't need that right now. We're going to use it. And now I'm going to take these 3 pieces and just kind of decide which one I'm going to go with first. I could go with the long one, the medium, and the small. I could go with the small, the long, and the medium. And I could go with the medium, the small, and the bigger one. I just am trying to establish a random pattern. It doesn't matter, okay? So this is the angle to angle. So what I want to do is I want to first get my butt joint put into place. There's two different ways of doing this, and I'm going to show you both. Get the butt joint into place, let it down. Now it's close to the locking system right here. Now I'm going to start lifting it up at an angle down here. I'm going to take my tapping block and I'm going to start working my way back. See how that just went down flat? Get this started. I'm leaving an expansion joint of 1/4 inch along the back wall. Same thing. Just use my tapping block to get it locked in. Now I'm going to start the next one right here. Get that locked in. And now I'm going to start laying out some plank. Now this is where I go through and I make sure my patterns aren't the same with the other planks that are around it. I'm not going to put them, I'm going to give them a little space. I'm going to space it out a little. I'm just going to kind of lay them out and get them in the spot where I want them. Now I'm going to pull this piece back out because this is the one I bridged. Again, I'm going to get this part into the butt joint. Locking it in. Sliding it this way as far as I can. So now it's all locked in here. I laid it flat. It's just about 1/8 of an inch away from where it needs to go in. Now I'm going to come down here. I'm going to lift up, just get my fingers underneath the plank just a little bit. I'm holding it up, but I'm putting pressure down on this side to keep this part of the plank into that groove. Just lightly tap. Lift at an angle, lightly tap. Come back. And then it'll all start falling down. Now the key is to have a good tapping block. This is one that I designed. It's called the Plank Hammer. I like it because it's not so big and bulky like the other ones I used to use. It weighs still a good amount of weight, 2 pounds. Has a really nice handle so you can grip it in different spots. This is really DIY friendly. Okay, so now this was one of our cutoffs that we had from earlier, so I'm just going to use that. So again, it's supposed to go this way. I've reversed it, slide it in, use the locking system as your guide. I want to show you a different way though if you struggle doing this, which I don't think you will, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. And this is called the bridging method. So all you need to do is get your plank in here, slide it into the long joint, bring it back as far as you can. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the tongue to clear this. I don't want it to overlap this side, so I'm just going to stop it just short. Now it just falls into place, so it cleared that side. Take a scrap piece here, hook that on, make sure it lays flat so it's locked in. Now we're going to close that gap up, but first what we need to do is we need to use a spacer down on this end so that this plank won't move when we're hitting this. I just want to stop and take a pause here and just point out this vinyl plank that I'm installing. This is Floret Modine base. Just look at how realistic this plank looks. This is really a nice plank. I'm going to talk more about it later on. So we need to have something in there, otherwise that plank is going to go tight up against the wall or fireplace. take a scrap piece with the tongue on it. We're gonna lock it in there. We're gonna take our pull bar and our dead blow hammer, and we're gonna hit the plank this way to close that gap up. You can see how that went closed. So that's two different ways that you can do this if you struggle putting the plank together. This way works really good. So does the other way. This way is obviously going to be slower than using the other method I've been sharing with you. So there's two different types of locking systems on how you install it. One of them is angle to angle, which I've been showing you up to this point, and then there's the drop and lock, which I'm going to show you right now. Now the myth out there is that drop and lock is so much easier to install, so people flock to it. I'm telling you, don't. Stay away from it, because it's not a great locking system, and I'm going to prove that to you right now. If I pull on this, it pops out. If I pull on this, it doesn't pop out. This is stronger. So you can see the drop and lock is a lot weaker, it comes apart very easily. Well, that causes problems over time, and you can even check online, look at different forums. One of the biggest complaints about this type of plank is that over time, that locking system gives up. It breaks or it just loosens up, and now you're going to get popping or crunching noises under there. Your plank will gap. It's really a common problem out there, and that is why I like angle to angle, because it's stronger. It's going to hold together for you, and you're not going to have those kind of issues. But now I know some of you are still going to buy the drop and lock, and I want to share a couple of tips with you that you can use to make sure that you put this plank together properly and that you don't have issues with breaking the locking system as you're doing it. So here, let's watch. So all we want to do is get this plank started inside the joint, and then get it locked or in there, have it up at an angle. Once it gets into the channel correctly, just slide it back until you get this lined up correctly. Take your tapping block. Now it's all down flat. This is lined up right. Now I just take my mallet, hit that in. Okay, one of the things that you can have a problem with is hitting these joints down on these drop and locks and this part breaking. So what you can do is get that in place and then take a scrap piece, stick it in there. Once you get this in correctly and it's all locked in, now this will be perfectly lined up. Now just take your mallet and hit that down, and it should go down there perfectly without any problems. Just have the one piece in here. I can put this piece down here so it's up against the cabinet, and then I'm still going to use the locking system down here at the end. I do want to share with you that I reversed this plank, just like I shared with you in that first row, as my guide where I want to mark it. So there's my expansion joint. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another scrap and I'm going to hook it on right here. So now I can see where the gap is right here and where this next mark needs to be. And so I'm going to take my plank so it's facing groove to groove, slide it up against the cabinet here, and I'm going to make a mark right here. Now the 1/4 inch expansion joint I have is already on the locking system right there. That's against the cabinet. Now I can just make a mark even with this plank then. And so if I flip it around, now you'll see here's my mark, I need to draw a straight line now across that. I'll line that up, draw my line. Pull this out. So, get this locked in. I want to show you the next steps here. So we're going to move into the kitchen area in that back foyer. And so what I want to do to make sure I can get that plank straight with the plank that we've already installed is just measure away from the plank that we installed already. Any amount. I'm going to choose 3 feet. Then I'll measure from the mark to the wall. I'll go down to the other end of that wall. I'll measure out that same distance, which I just chose 3 feet. And so I'm going to make a mark and snap a line. Now the next step I'm going to do is I want to extend that plank all the way through that area. And I want to make sure that I get it completely straight with the plank we already installed. So I'll measure again from where we already installed the plank to that line. And that is how far I want the rest of this plank that I'm installing right now away from that line. So the 3 feet. Now that I have that all perfectly straight, I'm going to take some scrap pieces that I cut and I'm going to secure this floor all the way down to the end so we have a nice solid foundation to build off of. So I have this plank locked in. Here's my chalk line. You might not be able to see it very well. I'm going to measure to it. I'm about 12 1/4 and a little bit over. So I want to make sure that down here it's the same. And it is. So I'm good. So this plank is pretty straight. So what I'm going to do now is take this plank and I'm going to overlap it onto this plank perfectly, lining up the locking system with the plank underneath and perfectly lining the locking system up right here. Now once I do that, I can take my cheater board that we created earlier, stick it up against the cabinet, and now I can start to make my marks. And I have my square edge right here. This is my factory edge. If I didn't have it square, I could square up an edge with a speed square too if I wanted. I'm coming past, making my mark, and you can see right here is what I'm going to cut to come around for this piece. So what this is called is a cheater board. Now this is something that is going to save you a lot of time, and it's also going to be something that you're going to be able to use on all of your marking your wall cuts, all of your doors, and really any cut that you're going to have in your installation. It saves you a ton of time, and your cuts that you mark are going to be perfect every time when you use one of these. Now what you can do though is you can adjust how big of an expansion joint you're going to have. Now what I always do is I cut off this part of the plank. This is called the groove. That's what I cut off to make my cheater board. And you can take a little bit off or you can take it all off, and that's going to determine how big your expansion joint is. So you can play with that a little bit as you're making your cheater board and starting doing your first few cuts to see how much you want to take off of that. I usually take the entire groove off, and that usually gives me about 1/4 inch to 3/16 of an inch expansion joint, which is perfect for vinyl plank. Now I'm going to take this piece back out, locking it into the joint. So we get this in. I'm going to use one of these spacers. I'm going to put it in here in between the plank and the cabinet, and I'm going to adjust it and make sure that it's tight so that this plank doesn't move. Now this is a Bessie spacer, it's called. I like these, are the only kind of spacers I like to use. They adjust. Okay, so they're really handy to use. They sit down flat on the plank and they don't tip over. That plank will be solid when I have that in there. Now that I have that kind of in place there, I'm going to lift up. You can see it's all flat now. So now I'll just continue these 2 rows all the way to that wall. Once we do, then we'll get this straight with that line that we snapped. We'll secure this with some scrap pieces, and then we'll continue on with the installation. And we'll come back to these 2 areas later on and work backwards into them. There's actually a lot more I want to share with you inside this video. We're going to go down a hall into a bedroom and a bathroom. We have another bedroom to go into, and I'm going to share with you how to go through those doorways with the plank running the long way with the doorway and the short way. So parallel and perpendicular, which can be really challenging unless you use the tips that I'm going to share with you. We have some closets to go in. I'm going to show you how to go around a vent, and we're also going to dive deeper into how to use that cheater board. Now we have a nice solid row all the way across. Now I could take plank and stack it right up on top of this plank and mark this, or I could mark this row that's already in here, pull this out, cut this, and it'll be for right here. That's what we're gonna do. Now I'm gonna take my cheater board and I'm gonna mark this wall. But because I'm gonna be putting a row back into here after I pull this out, I need to do that before I can put this row in. So I need to make sure that I mark on the floor where the joint is, so that I don't put a joint in the same place. We can just stick our marker right up here and just run it right along. Okay, so now I have my factory edge here, so I know I'm square. I'm gonna bring the cheater board out past the corner, about 1/4 inch, and now I have my mark right here. Now I'm going to remove this row all the way down, and I'm going to make sure that I keep these in order. And I can always mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if I can't. If I feel like I can't keep them in order. It's really sometimes hard to get the tapping block in there. With the plank hammer, you can just tip it over on its side. The handle allows you to get in there and get some good leverage to be able to put that second to last row in. Really works pretty slick to do that. Now I'm going to also share a different tool with you here for this last row that we're going to do, and that's called the pull bar. This is something else that you want to get that has some decent quality to it, so that when you hit it, it doesn't bend. I would highly suggest that you buy something with decent quality. I'll leave a link below for these tools that I'm sharing with you in here in the description of the video. There is another tool that I use a lot. It's called a linoleum knife. This is something that you can pick up at any of the big box stores in the carpet department. This is like one of the tools that I use the most in all of my arsenal. Really a good handy tool to have. So now instead of us working away from the groove, which is the proper way, now we're going to have to work away from the tongue. Makes things a little bit more challenging, and there's an extra step in there. It's not that this is hard, it's that it's a little bit more time consuming. It takes a little bit more to get used to, especially after you just installed a few hundred square feet or more going forward. So the tongue has no forgiveness to it, because this is the part that actually plugs into the groove. Where the groove, when you hit this with the tapping block, that's just the bottom edge. The tongue actually inserts into the plank, so you can damage the groove a little bit and still put the plank together. But if you damage the tongue, it makes it really difficult to get the plank together. So what I want to do is not use the tapping block on my tongue. I want to use a scrap piece that I put on and then use my tapping block. And you can see it's already laid flat for me. Now I believe that using the scrap is what you need to do with most tools. But I believe with the plank hammer that I can deliver a delicate blow. Because of how easy this is to handle, I can use finesse and not use that scrap piece and damage this tongue. Which saves you a lot of time. Just get it in the track, plank hammer, finesse, it's all about finesse. see, the difference is now I need to clear this locking system of the tongue, so it's a bigger gap that we need to close up. So I set it down and you can see we have about a 1/4 inch gap. Now I'm gonna just lift up at an angle and just tighten the gap up. It's still up, now watch as I go lightly with this and just use some finesse and it'll just fall down. And you can see now it just falls right into place. There's no damage to the tongue whatsoever using the plank hammer. When we come through a doorway into another room, I like to square that plank up with the room that I'm going into. Because the doorway is less than 3 feet wide, you can adjust that plank a little bit to square it up with the room that you're moving into. And that's where we're gonna be at this part of the video. So here, let's watch. So now I'm going to measure off of the back wall, and I'm just going to measure out towards this wall over here, but I want to be a couple feet away from that wall, and I'm just going to use a number, just an even number is what I'm going to use. So I'm going to go 10 feet. I'm going to make a mark here. I'm going to mark this at 10 feet. Now I'm just going to stick my nail right in the middle of that line. Stick my chalk line over here. If you have somebody to hold it, you don't need to use this method, but I don't have anyone to hold it. I'll stretch my chalk line all the way across, and now I'm going to snap a line. Now I'm going to hook on to this, now that I got my starter going. Now in the doorway here, where I'm connected to the plank that's already been installed, I'm measuring away from that to that line that I snapped in the floor. And that's the measurement I'm going to use to get the rest of the plank straight with that line so that we know that we're perfectly straight. So if that measurement was 3 feet, as an example, then I would measure to get the rest of that plank at 3 feet away from that line. So I think you can see my line, maybe not, but all I did here is I stuck my cheater board underneath the wall, underneath the jamb, in this way a little from the door jamb, and I just drew my line up, and now I'm drawing it this way. And then I'm just going to run it along the sheetrock for the rest of the way. And that's how I got my line. And now you can see the joints start to tighten up. It's in right there, still need to go in down there. Okay, that's it. Now I need to get this in. Now she's in nice and flat. Now I'm going to take my next piece, which is going to be a full piece here that I'm going to start with. I'm going to get it in the track. So this is all connected now. Slide it that way until I get to my proper gap. And I'm going to hit it up here where it's more solid to get that in first. And then just start lightly tapping back here. Now, because this is loose and it's not secure, we can have a little struggle here to do this. You can see, now that I got it in, I was just using this knife to hold it while I tapped it. Now we're gonna make this so that that stays nice and secure for us. You can also add these in before you do that tapping, but I'm gonna stick a spacer in here. And now you can see that that's nice and secure, it's not going anywhere. So in this next part of the video, I want to share with you another method that you can use if you're struggling getting that plank together in the doorway, because you might have a thicker plank, something that's more durable, where the locking system, you can't just hit that together. You got to get the plank up at an angle more severely to be able to get it to lock together. Now there's a method that you can do to modify the locking system, the groove, which I'm going to show you right now, so that you don't have to lift up at an angle. You can just slide the plank together and it locks together. So let me show you that again. You just slide it together and you can see that joint is tight and it just pulls apart. And all you're gonna do is modify this locking system, and we're gonna put a little glue in it to get that to stay together. So here, let's watch. So what I'm doing here is I'm modifying the locking system, and I'm taking the lip of the groove off. And the reason why I do this is so that we don't have to lift the plank at an angle to get it together. When you can see the lip right here, is all I do is run the utility knife right down the edge of that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use some clear Gorilla Glue. And before we do that, we want to activate that clear Gorilla Glue with water. So I'm taking a terry cloth that I got wet, and I'm going to make sure that I get that on the groove and also on the tongue. So you want to make sure that you get that moist. And as all I did was dip that terry cloth right in water, I wrung it out just a little bit. So there's definitely some water on there. And then I'll just rub that terry cloth right down the locking system. Now again, that's what's going to activate the clear Gorilla Glue to make sure that this is going to hold for you. Now be sure that you run a nice good bead of the clear Gorilla Glue right down the joint like I'm showing. And now we're just going to slide this plank in here. Now you can see how the plank goes underneath the door jamb. There's no way I could lift that plank up right now to get it at an angle to get it locked in. And when you have a very big, long plank, especially a thick vinyl plank like this that's extremely durable, not very bendable, well, it's going to take modifying the locking system to get that together. Now once you're all done putting that plank together, take that rag with denatured alcohol again and clean that joint off really good. You don't want to leave any clear Gorilla Glue left on top of this plank. If it dries, it's going to be very difficult to get off if you get it off at all. Now I'm just going to continue on doing the same thing. You can see how easy this makes this to be able to put the plank in when you are in a doorway. Just modify that locking system. Now I can bend it a little bit to get that joint together. Not quite all the way. We'll finish that up in a little bit, but now let's put the long joint all together. So I use my plank hammer to get it started, and then we're going to finish it off using our pull bar. So we'll get that short joint together, and now we go down and get the long joint all together using that pull bar. Once we get that plank locked together, I make sure I wipe the joint off really good, and then we're going to apply some blue tape to hold those plank together, and we'll leave that blue tape on until the next day. So in this situation, if it was a struggle to put this plank in, we could modify the locking system and only have to start it right here where the plank ends, and then carry that on all the way to the end of the wall here. So this would be the section of plank that would need to get modified. So not really too much at all, and then it would make it a lot easier for you to be able to get that plank into place, glued and locked in. I'm going to line this plank up perfectly on top of the plank underneath, so the locking systems are lining up perfectly with one another. And I only need to bring this piece, I don't need to put another one on there, I just needed to get past the corner here. So now all this is lined up all the way along here. So it's going to run underneath, and then I'll just make sure I get it where it needs to be there. So now I have this marked right here. Get it square, so it's going to go underneath this trim. Now along the sheetrock. And then right here is where I'm cutting out for this. Now this is a spot where I would just go ahead and get this thing down into place right here. Right before I get to the jamb, I'm going to drop it down, I'm going to lock it. Now I'm going to attach a scrap piece right here, and I'm going to hit that and then just knock it that way until it gets underneath. Try to slide it under. And you see how I have the sheetrock cut up here? That was so I could slide the plank as far as I can that way. Now I can clear the locking system here, and I can start to bring the plank back. Now I'm just going to lift up right here. I'm going to get it locked into the butt joint. So that's locked in. Now I can lift up, get my hand under there, and start working this in with the plank hammer. Shoved my scrap piece in there. I lift it up just a little with my fingers, and I hit it that way. And then it locked down. Now to continue on into this closet, I'm just going to take a scrap piece, a full piece, whatever it would be. I'm going to stick it in here. You could do a couple scrap pieces. Get that locked in. Now I'm going to hook on plank to both sides, or to this scrap piece. And I want to make sure when I do this that this joint doesn't line up with any other joints. So you've been seeing me use this tool quite a bit in this video. Now this is what I call the plank hammer. It's a tapping block. This is one that I designed that has a handle on it that I like because you're able to move your hand around in different spots to be able to get some finesse with this tapping block, because not all plank goes together the same, and you can use this delicately and you can also use it with some brute force. I designed this to really be DIY friendly, and so I wanted to share this with you. Now a tapping block, whether it's this one or not, is really going to help you with your plank installation. It's nice because it's all in one, right? You don't have to use a separate tapping block with a dead blow hammer or a rubber mallet. It really makes it so that you can use both hands for holding the plank and also for holding your tapping block to get some finesse and put that plank together. So this is something that I would recommend whether you buy the plank hammer or something similar to it. Get yourself a tapping block. It's really going to help you so much with your vinyl plank installation. Now I'll share a link below this video that you can go and check out on my tools page. Check this out. I also have one more tool that's called the plank puller, and this is a pull bar. This is also a tool that you would need to use inside your project along walls and things like that. So check this out also. I'll leave links below for both of these. So let's continue with the video. So same thing, I'm just going to run the cheater board up to the sheetrock. So it's going to slide underneath. Draw my line. Normally I would be inside here, but I'm trying to show you. So I didn't go far enough. I need to bring this in some more. That'll be short if I put it right there. So I'm going to draw it in more. Now this marker will come off with denatured alcohol. Comes right off easy. Or just normal alcohol. So now this will be what I'll cut out. So now we're just going to do the same thing that I did earlier. Slide it until I can't slide it anymore. Hit it down. Put a scrap on here. And then we'll hit it this way. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to slide this under, and I need to get my hand underneath here a little bit and then bend right here. And I need to kind of make this so it's going to get into the joint. So what I did is I came past a little bit. See how I'm past a little bit? Then I bend it both ways. So here and here. And that gives it so that I can get it right into that joint then. Now take your plank hammer and hit it forward until it goes into the joint. Now it needs to lock in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up. I'm going to get my hand under here. So I'm at an angle now, you can see that. And then I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to try to do this so that you can see it. I got my hand under. Now I'm just going to lock this in. And it just locked in there and there with a light tap. And now everything is locked together, nice and flat. And I'm going to mark this. Now I can just slide my cheater board up against here. I know that I want it to come to about right there. I can square it up with the plank, draw my line. Same thing, come in here. I want it to end right about there. I can square my cheater board up with the plank and then just make my mark. And so right here is where I'm cutting out. this is going to be kind of a little bit of a pain in the butt. What we want to do is get it so that it's close to being locked in right here. Lift up underneath the plank right here and get it to lock in. Now this long joint is all locked in. So there's a couple of ways to do a door like this, and the easiest way I can show you is that you want to have a joint somewhere in the doorway here. So you wanted to avoid having a joint in this doorway until you got to right here. So now what we want to do is we want to line up our long joint. So make sure your locking system lines up with the locking system of the plank underneath. Now we'll just take our cheater board and do what we did on the other door and start marking it. So right there is about where I want to make my cut. And it comes to right there. So this is the stuff I want to cut out right here. So what I want to do is I want to lock this in, slide it as far as I can before it's going to hit right there. Get it locked down. Now before I lock all of this in, I'm going to lock that little joint in. Okay, now I'm going to finish putting in the long joint, and I'm going to use my plank hammer. Get this up a little. You can see it just locked in. Okay. Now we have that all together. Now what I'm going to show you here is what I call the double cheater board method. And so this is when you have a plank that you can't get into place because something's in the way, like a pipe or a door jamb, something like that. So you can pull that plank back one row, and then you can just hook on to your cheater board another piece of plank that you haven't modified the locking system on at all. It's just cut a chunk off and you add it to your cheater board, and that gives you a double cheater board, so you can position your plank in a different spot where it's not going to hit like a door jamb, a pipe, or something like that, and you can use this as your cheater board, which I call the double cheater board method. Here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let's watch. So coming into a doorway like this, it's always more difficult than to work away from it. So what we want to do is have a joint somewhere in this doorway to make it easier for us to get through it. So just take a look at where you haven't had a joint in a while, and then that's where I would put my joint. So like right here, I haven't had a joint. So I'm going to put this right here. Now the other thing I want to share with you is I can't push this as far as I need to go. That still goes back that way another ½ inch. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the double cheater board method, so that we can actually position this plank out here and push it this way to get it to the proper spot. So what I'm going to do now is line that piece up perfectly where it needs to go, and I put it in that second row out. Now I attach a scrap piece, and this is going to be my guide to make sure I get that plank perfectly in place. I just made sure that I lined up the locking system of the scrap piece with the plank underneath. I cut my other piece, and now I put another scrap piece onto my cheater board. I'm getting that ready, and I'm going to use that now to mark. So you can see how slick this is. It really makes it easy when you have a door jamb that's in the way to be able to make those proper cuts. Now I'm just going to slide a plank underneath a little bit to see exactly where I need to cut. I square it up a little bit, and then I'll make a mark where that jamb is going to end. And then I'm going to do the same exact thing on the other side. So once again, what we're going to do here is slide that plank forward till we get to the corner of the door jamb. And now we're going to use a scrap once again. And we're going to use a pull bar and this dead blow hammer. Now this is riding along the edge of that locking system because I locked in the long joint. It's able to slide underneath this jamb really easily. You can see I'm putting a little bit of brute strength behind it, but not too much. I'm hitting it a little bit hard there, but it slides pretty easily. You can see that having the right tools really is going to help you if you want to install vinyl plank without using transitions in these doorways. Just in this doorway alone, I'm using, for both of these pieces, I'm using a good heavy duty pull bar to be able to get all of this in place. And just remember, if you can't get through this door, remember that method that I shared with you earlier to modify the locking system to make it much easier. Now let's move to the other side of this door, and what I do is I hook on a scrap piece there, and then I just measure from wall to wall. I cut the plank to fit. I'm going to hook onto that scrap piece, and this is such a short area that we don't have to worry about snapping lines or getting that plank straight. It's pretty solid in there and straight as it is. And then you can see I just take my cheater board and I'm going to repeat the process of marking out the jambs on both sides of this door. We'll cut this plank and then we will slide it into place. Now the sheetrock is up a lot on this wall, so I'm going to run it under a little. So I'll just keep doing the wall. This side of the vent and this side. Now I can make my mark right here. That's for that part of the vent. And this is for this part. So I'm putting my square edge up against the vent here. And my square edge there. So now I'll make my mark there, and right here is where the vent ends then. So now this is my vent cut. Just kind of get it into place here, somewhat locked in. Get the butt joint locked in first, let it flop down, take my tuck knife here and try to just get it to come a little closer. So that was a lot of information that I just gave you. I know this is a long video, one of the longest I've put out, but a lot of information from the very start to the very end of any vinyl plank project out there. Now I do want to tell you that the vinyl plank that I used inside this project, I mentioned that it was a Floret product, which happens to be my favorite vinyl plank. I'll have some information in the description of this video so you can go and check them out. I was using their Modine base, which is their lower end vinyl plank, and then they have another step up from that, a couple different types of plank. And then I don't know when you'll be watching this video, but I do know, and they might not appreciate me saying this, that they have some other things coming in the very near future that I'm pretty excited to see. But again, that was the Floret product. I also will put a link below for those tools that I shared with you. And I also want to just tell you, if you have a big project and you're feeling overwhelmed, well, first off, I just want to let you know that I do have a membership site that you can check out. It's called Plank Boot Camp. Now you can come and join, get a membership, come in, ask questions, share drawings with me. I even have a drawing software on there that I show you how to use, so you can share a drawing with me. I'll go through that with you, help you with plank direction, where to start, how to start those first rows, help you with the layout, obviously. And then any questions that you have during your entire project, you can come and ask me. That's a year-long membership, so it gives you plenty of time to be able to work on your project. Now, I just want to say also that I would like to pray for you. Father God, I pray for everybody watching this video and who has a project out there, Lord. I know that this can be tough on family life, work life. And so I pray, Lord, that if anyone's feeling overwhelmed, that you would just put them at peace, Lord. Put them at peace. I pray that you help them find the information that they're looking for, Lord. And I pray that life just doesn't get in the way while they're working on these projects. I pray that you bless them and their families. And I pray for that in Jesus' name. Hey, again, my name is Joe Latender, and if you liked this video, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and if you want to be notified of more videos that I have coming out very soon, hit that bell, that notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. I just want to say thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you. I'll see you on the next video.